Here we go. Baruch Hashem. So nice. See, we're quite on time. Come on, more people, put on your cameras for that personal effect. Yeah, Malka. Hi. Yes, see, Malka's a good example. Come on. And the people already here, Pamela and Karen and Dina and Sandra. Yay. Okay. Let's see. All right, since it's 8:30 and we don't want to miss a single moment. So next Sunday will be the Sunday before Lag BaOmer. So we'll also include something about Lag BaOmer, which means it's a year because my first Zoom class, my first Galei Night Zoom class was on Lag BaOmer last year. So I've been studying this book for almost a year. Baruch Hashem, Rav Yitzchak's wonderful book. So here we go. So we're gonna, we'll review a couple of pages as we do. So page 130 for those proud book owners. Open your book to 130, the middle of the page. And are we ready? L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay. The spiritual system of Tanya is suited to those of us who have matured into spiritual adulthood and are ready to know the full extent of our darker side. So why not? I mean, we may as well know it. I mean, we shouldn't keep it from ourselves. Somebody has to know it. I mean, we can decide what we want to do about it, but let's know it. We have to be brave. I'm sure we all want to know it. Let's know it. Okay, the full extent, without yet combating it directly. Our intellectual detachment, this is a very good sentence here. I'm going to go over it. I'm just going to read it, then we'll go over it slowly. Our intellectual detachment at this stage allows us to view evil in its proper perspective and referee a balanced and honest interplay between our higher aspirations arising from our divine soul and our human frailty arising from our animal soul. Okay, so there's four really good things here. Our intellectual detachment, so that's separation. That's the Baal Shem Tov's Havdalah. We have to be able to separate from our animal self and observe it. Just observe it, just a little scientific observation. Neutral. We have to, so we spoke about, that was like the beginning of the book, that Hachna'ah was making our ego, our anxiety smaller. And once it's small, there's room to step outside of it and observe it. We have to be able to do that. Then the next key word that really helped me this week is referee. We're the referee between our animal soul and our divine soul. I found this idea really helpful to me during the week. Remember, this is a review from last week, because those different things do come up. The animal soul does have its taivas, even after all these years. And or wherever taivas to like relive trauma, I mean, whatever the taivas may be that distract us, make us forget about Hashem. So we have to referee. That's going to want a voice. Think about me. And then there's the divine soul that wants to cleave to Hashem, wants to remember Hashem. So, and we're the referee. So I think it's very helpful to see ourselves, to identify as the referee rather than identifying as the animal soul, because we do have to step away from our total identification since we were born with our animal soul. Okay. Having matured sufficiently to recognize our unique purpose in life, our shlichus, we identify the evil within us as that which prevents us from fulfilling our shlichus. So we spoke about that. We're going to get up to that again on the next page and the chart that explains it. But this is a more subtle idea of evil. What prevents us from fulfilling our shlichus? And, you know, it's different at different times. I mean, why aren't I calling my cousin in Rochester? I mean, it's, you know, like, why? Oh, I should. But it's like I have a little psychological complex, maybe her mother and my mother, something. I mean, whatever, some ridiculous psychological complex. It's like whatever it could be. So that's evil. It's a personal evil. Although the evil is indeed within us, hindering our progress, we know that in truth, it is not who we are. So we don't have to identify with it. We can just examine it. We don't have to. See, the problem with a lot of modern approach to psychotherapy is they tell people to identify with their taivas. If you have some weird taiva, yes, you must be honest and true to your taiva. Identify with your taiva. So this is saying something else. This is saying it's not who we really are. It's the animal soul. It's that we're more than that. At this stage of spiritual maturity, it is paramount that we recall that our divine souls were given a holy task and an enemy to fight and subdue. Our divine soul has a shlichus. It came down to this world with a shlichus. So we have to move our identification there a little bit every day, or a lot every day. When we dissociate ourselves from our own evil, we can engage in broad, deep, intellectual analysis of all facets of our psyche and the role they play in our connection to Hashem. And we all want to make our connection to Hashem more real. I mean, that's why we're learning this. We want it to be more real. We want it to be a real thing, connection to Hashem. So it's the animal soul that blocks that because it has a lot of mundane desires and it wants a lot of attention. But this is what we want to make it more real, our connection to Hashem. This type of analysis has been developed most fully in the extensive literature of Chabad. And this is, the Likutei Torah, Torah Or, the Alter Rebbe speaks about this, the first Chabad Rebbe and all of his followers. This is a basic idea. Our strength and make our connection to Hashem more real. Out of this bottom paragraph, out of this honest recognition of our human capacities and their detailed intellectual analysis, springs the potential for each of us to behave as a tzaddik of sorts. We're on the top of 131, anyone who came in late. So we spoke about when we were defining all these terms, tzaddik, beinoni, rush, it's different stages of consciousness. There's moments in the day that we can touch the tzaddik level of consciousness. Our analysis enables us to see that all the shortcomings in the world, even those in ourselves, exist only for our elevation. So this is the idea of Yeridat Sorech Aliyah. Any of our falls is order to bring us up to a higher place. I think that's a very basic Hasidic idea and very important. So we don't get depressed about our falls. That would be silly to waste time being depressed. To remember that we can go up from them. It's to bring us to a higher place. We can become more compassionate, less judgmental, etc. We can become aware of the evil hidden away in our soul and reveal it to the objective other within ourselves, our higher self, the potential tzaddik within, or to our counselor, or to our friend. In this fashion, we find the way to rectify and elevate the evil and transform it into good. Eventually, we're able to assume the role of the counselor for others and act as the fully mature and wise elder whose experience in life has granted us the insight of the sage. We have learned something from our experience in life. At this stage of spiritual development, we feel the divine power granted us when we were adjured to be righteous and not be wicked. This is the first line of the Tanya, that before we come into this world, we're empowered really to be righteous and not be wicked. I've really been only understanding that more recently, that it's really an empowerment. It's something we should know that we're empowered. We have the strength to not give in to the animal soul. It's like sometimes we might not have known that. We might think that it just, we have to give into it. I'm laughing and crying at the same time. Don't get me wrong. But okay. So now we're up to my most favorite paragraph in the whole book, what I really got the most out of. We can now see how our concept of evil changes with our stage of spiritual maturity. So this is stuff we've gone over a lot, but let's do it one more time. At the first level, we see evil as whatever the Torah defines as wrongdoing and as our inclination to do wrong. So does everyone get that? That's like, you can say this to a 5-year-old. The Torah says you can't do it, but I want to do it. So we have to recognize that when it's happening. We have to identify. I found that extremely helpful. Just identifying it as that And then this free choice, we could still give into it, or we could feel like we don't have to give into it. This is what it is. I'm identifying it. It could be on the thought level. I could be having a thought. The Torah says this is not a kosher thought, but I want to think it. So we have the strength. We can referee. We have the strength. We're empowered to not follow it. It's such an empowering idea. That's first level evil, which really could be explained to a 5-year-old. The second level, evil becomes the psychological complexes that block us from fulfilling our purpose in life. Okay, so we spoke about this many times. This is more personal, but it's keeping me from my shlichus. Why shouldn't I be able to do my shlichus full steam ahead? Because I have some psychological complexes. Okay, so in my life, I could identify them as evil. They're keeping me from my shlichus. And the third level we identify as the traumas, trials, and tribulations of this lifetime and past lifetimes. Here, whatever is bitter is evil. Now, this is an important point that Torah Sanefesh has really helped me understand this point, that whatever is bitter is evil. So this is whether we did it or it happened to us. It's something that we have to do tshuva on. And I think that we understand if we did it, something wrong, that we have to do tshuva. That's not hard to understand. But for me, which was more mind expanding, was the idea, even if it happened to us, we were the so-called, what's known as the victim. So why do we have to do tshuva? Because it's separating us from Hashem. Because it's like we forget that Hashem was there with us. We forget that it was Hashgacha Pratis. We forget that it's supposed to make us a deeper and more sensitive and less judgmental and more compassionate person. And we let it separate. So what we're doing tshuva on is not the thing, but the separation from Hashem that it caused in us. Because why should we be separate from Hashem? Well, it's painful to be separate from Hashem. It's very painful, as we know. So whether we did it or whether it happened to us, we can put in that category. To me, this was a mind-blowing idea, that to the idea of doing, and we see we need it. As soon as I copped it, I understood that the things that happened to me were separating me from Hashem. I was reliving the trauma, whatever it is. And when we spoke about, we had some classes on healing from reliving trauma. And one of the basic ideas was, just as now Hashem is with me. Hashem was with me when it happened. I wasn't alone. That could be very comforting. If I think that I was alone when it happened, it's much more of an alienating experience. If Hashem was there suffering with me, it's much more of a healing experience. So we want to reconnect with Hashem. So I thought that was very helpful. So whatever is bitter is evil, and its very existence is meant to motivate us to sweeten it by transforming it into good. What stifled our development earlier now spurs us on, and evil becomes the throne of good, which is a quote from the Baal Shem Tov, Keser Shem Tov, chapter 26. So now spurs us on is the idea of a catalyst. It becomes a catalyst for growth. What stifled our development earlier now becomes a catalyst for growth. And that's a very exciting idea. And we see it. You know, I mean, those people that I went to 4th grade with were having a happier childhood didn't become frum, unfortunately. They didn't feel that need to search and go and find. And, you know, so we see the truth of it. It can spur us on. It can be a catalyst for growth. Amirat Hashem. Okay, so now we have this lovely chart here. So again, it's from the bottom, Hachna'a, Havdalah, Hamtaka. So the submission is objective wrong. The separation is, so it's in terms of attitude towards evil. So Hachna'a, the attitude toward evil, is objective wrong. For separation, it's our psychological complexes. We consider them evil. We need to overcome them. And the sweetening is our attitude towards evil. It's a challenge to be sweetened. All of these things can be sweetened if they're taken to their roots. Okay, we are turning the page. So we did the first 2 paragraphs here on page 132 for anyone who came in late. If a few more kind people want to put on their cameras, you'll get extra credits in the final marking period. I'll write a note. Yes, that's the attitude. Oh, I love when I see the people. It really empowers me. It does. L'chaim, l'chaim. And we have a full screen of people. Okay, so top of 132, the apex of the arc. The middle of the 9 substages of submission, separation, and sweetening is the 5th, separation within separation. So we spoke about this last week, that if you think of it as an arc, the 9 stages, each of the 3 incorporated within the 3, and the middle of 9 is 5. You could picture, here's an aid. You imagine a menorah with 8 candles, and then there's the shamash in the middle. So that's the 5th one. So the 5th is the middle of 9, right? So what's the 5th? What's the middle of these 9 stages? It's separation within separation, Havdalah within Havdalah. And we identify this stage as self-redefinition, the renewal of divine consciousness at its source, and the technique we described to achieve this end was meditative prayer. So we're going to say more about all these key words being here: self-redefinition, renewal of divine consciousness at its source, and meditative prayer. I mean, it sounds like a huge relief to me, self-redefinition. Okay, but let's continue more. Aren't you tired? I'm very tired of my old definition of myself. It's time for a new definition. When we discussed the dynamics of meditative prayer, we noted that according to Kabbalah, the liturgy, the prayers describe the ascent of the soul to its source, that's going up the arc, and its subsequent descent back into created reality. In the larger context of all 9 substages, we may view all the stages preceding meditative prayer as techniques that help us up and out of our problems, and all those following it as techniques that help us descend back into reality in order to face and rectify our problems. This is explaining davening. What is it? The beginning is to help us up and out of our problems, because we need to connect with Hashem. We can't be totally consumed by our problems. Okay, then we rise up above our problems, and then we descend back into reality in order to face and rectify our problems. But we have a new inspiration, a new outlook on life. Meditative prayer thus becomes the apex of the ascent and descent that describes the arc of the entire therapeutic process. So this is where we got up to last time. But this made me very curious to go back and look at that separation into separation, which is on page 46. So fold over this page or put in a bookmark if you're that type. And please turn to page 46 if you have the book. And we're going to look at separation within separation, self-redefinition, because I think it's a very important idea. And I felt I really benefited by this review. Even though it was a lot of work turning back to page 46, I felt it was really worth the effort. Okay, so we're back to the 5th stage here. The next stage of therapy is positive self-redefinition. As we said previously, one of the dangers of anxiety is that it may encourage us to define ourselves in terms of our problems. And we find people do that. We define ourselves in terms of our problems. It's pathetic. Who wants to be defined in terms? That is not a good idea. Does everyone agree with me? Please agree with me. Yes, we don't want to define ourselves in terms of our problems. Okay, we can identify with that. We can counter this pitfall by becoming aware of our divine soul, the undefiled point of inner purity that cannot be sullied by the illusions of the animal soul's ego and the anxiety it produces. So what are we trying to get into our identity, our divine soul, undefiled point of inner purity? Don't you wish you'd known about that while growing up, that we can identify with an undefiled point of inner purity that cannot be sullied by whatever our experiences of life have been? Like, that's so much better than my definition of myself, definition being a basket of problems. It's much better, undefined. Okay. Next paragraph here on page 46. Despite the real or imagined gravity of our situation, there remains deep within us an untouched and unaffected point of wholeness and goodness. As soon as we remember this, we can use this point to recast our whole situation in a more positive light. This is saying this is where healing comes from. This is really the Torah Sanefesh approach to healing. Once we remember this, we have to remember, oh, yes, I have a divine soul. And then we can recast our whole situation in a more positive light. This is what our good friend slash therapist can help us do. Without this awareness, we may conceive of our inner selves as problematic or even tainted by some psychological disorder or complex, which is a very average thing. People tend to identify them. We could, a different, especially adolescents, just identify ourselves as some disorder, as a psychological disorder. I hate identifying as a psychological disorder, or what was the other thing? Or complex. In truth, however, we possess an identity and selfhood that is independent of our anxieties. So good to know, so good to share with our children and friends. If we can gradually identify with this inner point of health, we can rehabilitate ourselves in its image. So this is saying that our health, our mental health is going to come from our identity with our divine soul. From this point can come healing. Okay. So we're on the top of page 47 now. Depression, for example, often springs from a deep sense of failure in life. Having failed repeatedly, depressed people start to give up. Because they're unable to achieve their goals, they lose their motivation and become physically and morally weak. In extreme cases, they may even lose their will to live. What really struck me here was morally weak. What's the problem with depression? Why is so much in Hasidus about being besimcha? Because if we get depressed, we become morally weak. I mean, and because it doesn't matter, oh, I'm just a failure. What does it matter? Why shouldn't I give in to my tithas and have some pleasure in life? So that's depression. I'm crying. I really spent so much time laughing and crying simultaneously. It's good that I learned from Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that we can really do both at once. Because so this is, I think this is very important to know, because if, God forbid, if we find ourselves depressed or a friend is depressed, to be aware that the danger of depression is the moral weakness that comes from it. Such frustration and disappointment are the side effects of an unchecked ego. This is a good paragraph. Frustrated or disappointed people feel how far away they are from their would-be self-image, from their imaginary self-image. Here, the destructive ego-based feeling that one is nothing or worthless must be isolated from the constructive feeling that one is nothing in the presence of Hashem. So what is this saying? This is an idea we've spoken about, that there's a huge difference between low self-esteem, which is ego-based, that I didn't meet up to some imaginary self-image, and true hachna'ah, true shiftless, true lowliness, recognizing that I'm a creation and not God. I'm dependent on Hashem to recreate me, to keep me well, that I could keep on breathing for each breath. We're dependent on Hashem for each breath. Being dependent, which in Western psychology is not considered good, being needy of dependent, but this helps us in our shiftless, in our lowliness, in our holy lowliness, that we need Hashem, as opposed to ego-based low self-esteem, which it's all about me, I'm horrible, I hate myself. To recognize that has nothing to do with shiftless, it's just the ego doing, having its thing out. Okay, we're going to turn the page, just a couple of more ideas from going back to separation within separation. Okay, so the top of 48, the most effective way of contacting this inner point of origin is meditative prayer. And it's very interesting for those of us on the Galai English WhatsApp group. This is what Rav Yitzchak spoke. It's like a sentence or two each day from Rav Yitzchak. And today's was on this meditative prayer. So again, the most effective way of contacting this inner point of origin is meditative prayer. Normally, our instinctive awareness of being rooted in a higher spiritual source is buried deep within our unconscious. We can, however, bring it into our conscious mind through meditative prayer. So that's how we remember the divine soul. Remembering the divine soul is meditative prayer, even if we start with 5 seconds, and then move on to 10 seconds of remembering it. We have to start with 5 seconds. It's like we have to develop this ability of meditative prayer. This is the height of davening. Bring Hashem into our conscious mind. Since we are seeking here to renew ourselves in our divine origin, an abstract attempt to visualize ourselves ascending to our spiritual root will not work, for this is too superficial. Rather, the ascent must be part and parcel of our deepest heartfelt prayer to Hashem. We meditate in Hashem's presence, asking him to elevate us and draw us near to him, our ultimate source. So what is this saying? Deepest heartfelt prayer. Meditate in Hashem's presence. You know, Alavai, we have to remember that when we're davening, we're in Hashem's presence. And when we spoke about that, the Maharal said that the simplest kavana for davening is, I want to do tshuva, I want to get close to you. I mean, something that simple people like us can remember. I want to do tshuva, I want to get close to you. And we meditate, and we're in Hashem's presence, to remember, to keep the davening simple, to remember we're in Hashem's presence when we're davening. I want to do tshuva. I want to be conscious of you. So this helped me in my davening today when I was preparing this at 1 a.m. last night. It filtered into today's davening. We have to remember this. We meditate in Hashem's presence. We daven in Hashem's presence. Our whole life is in Hashem's presence. Okay, should we do one more paragraph? Okay, so the top of 49. The literature of Kabbalah describes how the progressive sections of the liturgy are an ascent to and descent from this divine awareness. As we advance through the liturgy, we ascend through corresponding stages of divine awareness and self-effacement until we reach total absorption in the reality of God. I mean, even if we have it for a moment in saying Shema Yisrael, saying Hashem Echad, even if we have a moment of a total absorption in the reality of God, the Beinoni is capable of this. The Beinoni is capable of a moment of, and we should daven for it. We then gradually descend back into awareness of the world and ourselves with renewed inspiration and dedication. Then we can face our problems. Our problems will not go away while we don't think about them and we think about Hashem. And perhaps we'll have renewed inspiration and dedication. Okay, so I think that was very helpful. For me, it was. Now we can turn back to, where were we up to? Page 132. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay, the middle of the page. This is new material now, though I found that old material quite helpful. Seen this way, meditative prayer is not the midpoint of the therapeutic process, but its high point, its goal, not the means to an end, but the end in itself. Indeed, the purpose of transforming evil into good, the end of the process, is to free us to realize our true divine selves and unite with Hashem in the most profound and meaningful way. So this is successful psychotherapy. If the person who comes for psychotherapy at the end is free to unite with Hashem in the most profound and meaningful way, that is successful psychotherapy. To be able to put aside all the distractions. And you know, the Alter Rebbe wanted women to daven 2 Shemona Esreis a day. I mean, lots of times it's hard. There's times when we can't. There's times when 1 Shemona Esrei is what we can do. There's even times in our life where it may be impossible, but then we can depend on the Rambam. The Rambam says women are yotzi on davening if they say, God help me once a day. That's got to get in that one, God help me. And then the Rambam will say, this girl is in. So that's good to know. But the Alter Rebbe wanted us to have this experience of meditative prayer, that we should be able to do two Shemona Esrei, which is what the Ramban says, that says women should do. And there's many examples, deep, important examples, where Hasidus takes the opinion of the Ramban over the Rambam, like in what happens after, what's the ultimate of the world to come. The Rambam says it's just souls, and the Ramban says it's souls and bodies, which is what Hasidus says. That's the ultimate. The souls will come back to bodies. So again, so here's the Ramban, two Shemona. So if we can, it's good to try to train ourselves to do two Shemona Esrei a day. But why are we doing it? Because meditative prayer, that we have to have this awareness, because healing comes from this point. And we want to unite with Hashem in the most profound and meaningful way. Okay, so here we are towards the bottom of 132, in the middle of the paragraph. Meditative prayer is thus the epitome of actualized divinity. As the sages said, would that a person pray the whole day. I mean, it's good to talk to Hashem, daven to Hashem, get Hashem back into our consciousness. As the Baal Shem Tov described consummate spiritual maturity as the ability to sustain conscious union with God, even while engaged in mundane conversation with another person. So to maintain conscious union with Hashem, to remember we're in Hashem's presence. I mean, even while talking to another person, not forgetting we're in Hashem's presence. And I think this is a tremendous gift we can give to other people. We all probably know people that are like this, very holy people, that they are aware of Hashem's presence. And when we talk to them, it also kind of overflows onto us, an awareness of Hashem's presence. So this is what we need, right? This is what we want. This is what we're going to daven for. So the Baal Shem Tov described this consummate spiritual maturity. And I think we can also say mental health. It's mental health. It's like really consummate mental health is the ability to sustain conscious union with Hashem, even while engaged in mundane conversation with another person. Right? So we have to pray. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, just saying the words that we're in Hashem's presence right now, I feel much better that we're in Hashem's presence. We don't have to be lonely. We're in Hashem's presence. Okay, we have identified the stage of separation with the Hasidic path of the Chabad school. And indeed, meditative prayer is accorded a central role in the classic Chabad lifestyle. So I just want to share personal anecdote, or something that a dear friend told me. When we lived in Crown Heights for 29 years, we lived next door to the Groners. Rabbi Groner was the Rebbe's secretary for many, many years. And his wife, Yehudis, I had this list that she was my chavrusa since the first day I became from in 1974. She came to she and her husband with a family at the Pesach Seder that I went to in 1974 at Machon Chana that the Rebbe came to. And we started learning then. So she told me, I'll tell you a little bit about her life. We're getting back, this is all leading to this prayer and Hasidic lifestyle. She was born in 1935 in Kharkov, and her father was in Siberia. He was caught giving bar mitzvah lessons. So her mother had 3 little girls at this time, 3 little girls under 5. And the Germans, Yimak Shemo, started marching into the Ukraine. So they had to flee, and some Hasidim had already made it to Samarkand. So she took her 3 little girls on the train to Samarkand, and when she ran out of money, she would go off the train and wash clothes for people, earn money, get back on the train till they reached Samarkand. And when they reached Samarkand, they found a place to live in a courtyard with other Chabad Hasidim. And the men would daven in the courtyard during the day. They would daven with a niggin. They would daven for hours. And she grew up like from the ages of 5 to 10, living there before they finally were able to escape. The war ended and they were able to leave Russia and eventually come to the West. But this idea of, to grow up with, to hear real davening, that real davening is happening. So this idea, this is very deep. So this is what it said. It's a central role in classic Chabad lifestyle. Is this davening, this meditative prayer, this connecting with Hashem, melting into oneness with Hashem. Okay, again, the top of 133. Seasoned adherents to this path become practiced at long, deliberate prayer that often extends for hours on end. The deep, intricate discourses on Kabbalah doctrine that characterize Chabad literature become the subject of intense meditation before and during davening, especially on Shabbos, as the individual veteran of life elevates all his worldly experience in his upward communion with his inner self and his creator. So what is this saying? It's the idea, they say Kabbalah Shabbos elevates the whole week, that the six chapters of Tehillim before L'chododi elevate each of the events of the 6 days of the week, and then we elevate them all. So davening elevates all our worldly experience in an upward communion with our inner self and our creator. So I did find preparing this at 1 a.m. last night, it was inspiring. It's something to think about while davening, and we can empower each other. And let's make a l'chaim here. Okay, so we have some more minutes. We have to use them wildly. So again, next week we'll do something on Lag BaOmer, because it's the last Sunday before Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer comes out Thursday night, Friday this year. And yeah, so, and as I said at the beginning, it's like 1 year since at least my initial Zoom class on Galei Nai. It's been a beautiful year, a great year. I'm very grateful. The Rebbe spoke about using modern technology to bring the Geula. And certainly Zoom is an example of that. It's like really unbelievable. Like to see the people. Oh, now that I'm mentioning seeing the people, come on, people. Let's turn on those cameras. It's a mitzvah. It gives me, it really makes a difference. Yes, there we go. Another camera went on. Okay, so now we're up to the sweetening within sweetening of the Beinoni and the Tzaddik. So at least we could start this idea tonight. So the sweetening within sweetening is the final of the 9 stages that we've been speaking about. We have associated the 3 stages of Hachna'ah, submission, Havdalah, separation, and Hamtakah, sweetening, with the 3 psychological prototypes of the Rasha, the Beinoni, and the Tzaddik, respectively. In this context, sweetening seems to lie only within the province of the Tzaddik. After all, only someone totally divorced from evil can safely transform someone else's evil into good. Since the ideal of the Beinoni is the one most of us are working towards, and the highest type of spiritual psyche we can achieve on our own, it would appear that most of us are incapable of progressing beyond the separation stage. Okay, so just something about the Beinoni. We know that the Alter Rebbe himself always referred to the Tanya Sefer Shel Beinoni. I mean, anytime he refers to it in Torah or Likutei Torah, it's Sefer Shel Beinoni. Of course, it was for the average person. One of the translations of Beinoni, people like us. The Alter Rebbe had a lot of faith in people like us, and we needed a whole sefer because we could be involved in the separation our whole life, being able to separate good from evil, being able to separate from my animal soul and identify with my divine soul. It's an avoda, n'est-ce pas, as we say in French. True, we may assume the role of the tzaddik in a relative limited sense, concomitant with our spiritual maturity. This is especially true as we approach the Mashiach redemption and are empowered by our dawning Mashiach consciousness, as we have explained above. So it helps, for those of us who are discussed to being at a Mashiach Suda at the end of Pesach, it helps. It helps Mashiach consciousness. Speaking about Mashiach, it's the Rebbe wanted us to be speaking about Mashiach. So the role of tzaddik is relative, because we spoke about how it is, all of these characters are different stages of consciousness. We can taste sometimes of the tzaddik level of consciousness in a day, but most of the time, alavai to be a Beinani. That's the struggle. The struggle is always to be a Beinani, and if we happen to be given a gift as a moment of tzaddik consciousness, to recognize it as a gift from Hashem. But the avoda is the Beinani. But in an absolute sense, most of us cannot honestly expect to transform our inner negativities into good so consummately that we never again experience even the slightest urge to fall prey to them, this being the definition of a tzaddik. So that's why the Alter Rebbe says in chapter 27, don't be startled, don't be shocked when these thoughts arise in our mind. I thought I had transformed them, and here they are plaguing me again. The Alter says, don't be shocked. Alavai to be a Beinani even for a moment. Alavai to be a Beinani and not a Rasha even for a moment. Because if I can do it for a moment, maybe I can do it for 2 moments. And it works both ways. Alavai to be a Beinani for a moment, and alavai not to be a Rasha for a moment. Great, look, at moment, I just had a moment where I wasn't a Rasha. That is cool. Okay, so turning the page to 134, the most we may hope is to be counseled either by a tzaddik, someone profoundly inspired by a tzaddik, or a relative tzaddik, even ourselves, and thereby transform some of our inner darkness into light. It's interesting. I'll share with you a personal moment. I had give the schus to have a relationship with Rav Yitzchak. He would stay with us when he came to Crown Heights to see the Rebbe. So we had that schus in Crown Heights. Baruch Hashem, till he had a married daughter living there. So it was for many years. So we have a relationship with a tzaddik. And I would, I've mentioned this before, I would mention about my psychological problems, traumatic childhood experiences. And he said to me once, why shouldn't it not have happened to you? And this shook me out of it. Why shouldn't it have happened to me? I'm supposed to probably promised a rose garden. Nothing bad is supposed to ever happen to me. I'm just supposed to sail along smoothly in my, why? Yeah, I mean, I'm here for my shlichus. I'm not here that I should be having a good time, but I should have had a happy childhood. I mean, we're here for our shlichus. All of those things had to happen. All of those things can be elevated and used as a catalyst for growth. But, you can't say that to everybody. Why shouldn't it have happened to you? You can only say that to someone that you have a relationship with, because it's strong. It's very strong saying that. Why shouldn't it have? But for me, it was what I needed to hear. I needed to hear it. And because I was hearing it from Rav Yitzchak, I was able to receive it. Why shouldn't it have happened to me? I mean, I didn't come with a guarantee that tough stuff is not going to happen. But we're again, for me, hachna'ah is really the idea that we're here for our shlichus. We're here for our shlichus. It's not about me. It's when I think there was a point in my life I couldn't even understand those words. It's not about me. I wouldn't have understood what that meant. We need to read a whole book to understand it's not about me. It's about my shlichus. It really changes everything. It changes everything.